Great engineers have a passion to improve life, a burning conviction that they can make life better for everyone. Engineers need to have a talent for invention and innovation, but what drives them is the conviction that they can find a better way to do things, a cheaper and more efficient solution to the problems of human existence on this planet of limited resources that we call Earth. Many of us spend a lot of time complaining about the difficulties and problems of life. It is easy to find fault with things that make daily life arduous. For an engineer, these difficulties can be opportunities. How can this be made to work better? How can that process be made more efficient? How can components be made more cheaply, more accurately, and more fit for purpose? Great engineers are convinced that everything can be improved. Instead of complaining, they think of ways to make things better. Since the dawn of civilization, music has always been an indispensable part of children's education. Today, in most countries around the world, music courses are still offered in schools as part of the basic curriculum. The ancient Greeks believed that they should be performed alongside mathematics and physics, as these subjects complement and enhance one another. Researchers at The Ohio State University conducted a retrospective study on the behavior of children. Mainly high school students who had been exposed to music courses in their early years or throughout their school life. The presence of music in adolescent education has a significant impact on their ability to understand complex concepts such as mathematics or physics.
The Australian Maritime College at the University of Tasmania, in partnership with CSIRO and University of Queensland, have been awarded $2.49 million in support for their new project that is set to attract and underpin investment in tidal energy in Australia. The project hopes to overcome barriers to investment in commercial-scale tidal farms in Australia by mapping the country's tidal energy in more detail than ever before.
Mural projects are an increasingly popular form of public art that transforms outdoor spaces into public art galleries. Our research explored this intersection of public space, public art, and public memory through the Big Wash Up. Using a technique called reverse graffiti, the project created dozens of outdoor murals. Their focus on local themes and characters celebrated community, identity, heritage, and memory. The process simultaneously honored community memories while creating new shared memories.
Today, many companies emphasize sustainability in their operations. For example, packaging should be made from recyclable materials to ensure proper disposal. In households, using energy-efficient kitchen appliance helps reduce environmental impact.
My son is unable to attend school. On the previous night, I found he was sick, and now I think it is better for him not to go to school so that we can avoid infection. I believe after some rest he will become well and will successfully pass his exam, and I am happy to help him catch up on the missed lessons.
The Oakham Area Career Program offers on-site, in-house teaching. The course is taught by experienced instructors, rather than outsourcing it. Our teachers understand each student's individual learning needs, meaning learners receive personalized feedback and support. This way, you'll never miss a class, for any reason.
Currently, there is concern about the increasing amount of time children spend in sedentary activities, the number of children who fail to achieve minimum daily physical activity guidelines, i.e. 60 min of moderate to vigorous intensity activities every day, and the apparent increase in obesity prevalence as a result of such sedentary behaviors. Screen-based activities, including television viewing and playing computer games, are among the most frequently observed sedentary activities that children partake, with children spending 2.54 per day participating in such activities. The introduction of active video games, AVGs, into the gaming market presents an opportunity to convert traditional, sedentary screen time into active screen time and thus increase total daily energy expenditure, e.e. Modern AVGs utilize cameras and motion sensors to allow the gamer to physically perform a variety of actions, dependent on the console, such as swinging a tennis racket or running. The most demanding AVGs provided similar responses to walking and, based on international standards, should be classified as low-intensity activities. Whilst AVGs may provide children with a better alternative to sedentary gaming, they are not a sufficient replacement for normal physical activity, e.g. sports and outdoor play.
Stars and the material between them are almost always found in gigantic, stellar systems called galaxies. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way system, happens to be one of the two largest systems in the local group of 24 or so galaxies. The other is the Andromeda Galaxy. It sketches more than 100,000 light-years from one end to the other, and it is located about 2 million light-years distant from us. The alpine newt is native to much of central continental Europe and occurs up the coasts of northeast France through to Holland, but it does not appear to have been native to the British Isles. As its name suggests, it can be found in montane habitats up to 2,500 meters in altitude, but it can also be abundant in lowlands, and it will use a variety of water bodies, including both shallow and deep ponds and slow-flowing streams.
When humans began farming some 12,000 years ago, they altered the future of our species forever. Our ancestors were ecological pioneers, discovering and cultivating the most valuable crops, scaling them up to feed entire communities, and transforming wild crops so fundamentally that they became dependent on humans for their survival. Farming, in the words of National Geographic's Genographic Project, sowed the seeds for the modern age.
Digital media and the internet have made the sharing of texts, music, and images easier than ever, and the enforcement of copyright restriction harder. This situation has encouraged the growth of IP law and prompted increased industrial concentration on extending and policing IP protection, while also leading to the growth of an open access or Creative Commons movement which challenges such control of knowledge and creativity.
Serving on a jury is normally compulsory for individuals who are qualified for jury service. A jury is intended to be an impartial panel capable of reaching a verdict. There are often procedures and requirements, including a fluent understanding of the language and the opportunity to test jurors' neutrality or otherwise exclude jurors who are perceived as likely to be less than neutral or partial to one side.
Founded after World War II by 51 peace-loving states, combined to oppose future aggression, the United Nations now counts 192 member nations, including its newest members, Nauru, Kiribati, and Tonga in 1999, Tuvalu and Yugoslavia in 2000, Switzerland and East Timor in 2002, and Montenegro in 2006. United Nations Day has been observed on October 24 since 1948 and celebrates the objectives and accomplishments of the organization, which was established on October 24, 1945. The UN engages in peacekeeping and humanitarian missions across the globe. Though some say its influence has declined in recent decades, the United Nations still plays a tremendous role in world politics. In 2001, the United Nations and Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the UN, won the Nobel Peace Prize for their work for a better organized and more peaceful world. Since 1948, there have been 63 UN peacekeeping operations. 16 are currently underway. Thus far, close to 130 nations have contributed personnel at various times. 119 are currently providing peacekeepers. As of August 31, 2008, there were 16 peacekeeping operations underway with a total of 88,230 personnel. The small island nation of Fiji has taken part in virtually every UN peacekeeping operation, as has Canada.
The narrative of law and order is located fundamentally at the level of individual guilt and responsibility. Criminal acts are seen as individual issues of personal responsibility and culpability to which the state responds by way of policing, prosecution, adjudication, and punishment. This is but one level at which crime and criminal justice can be analyzed. The problem is that so often analysis ends there, at the level of individual action, characterized in terms of responsibility, guilt, evil. In few other areas of social life does individualism have this hold. To take but one instance, it would be absurd to restrict analysis of obesity to individual greed. It should similarly be widely seen as absurd to restrict analysis of criminal justice issues to the culpability of individuals. Ancient paintings offer a fascinating glimpse into the lives, beliefs, and artistic skills of early civilizations. Many of these paintings were created on cave walls or pottery and have survived for thousands of years due to their preservation. The subjects of ancient paintings often include animals, humans, and scenes from daily life. These artworks were not only meant for decoration but also had religious significance. For instance, some cave paintings are believed to have been created for ritualistic purposes or to convey stories and folklore. The use of natural pigments and traditional techniques highlights the resourcefulness and creativity of ancient artists. Despite the passage of time, the beauty and intricacy of ancient paintings continue to captivate and inspire modern audiences. A peaceful environment plays a critical role in fostering a positive and productive atmosphere for education. When learners are surrounded by a supportive environment, they feel safe and secure, which enhances their ability to concentrate on their studies. A lack of distractions and disturbances also ensures that both teachers and students can engage meaningfully in the learning process. Furthermore, a calm and respectful atmosphere among classmates promotes cooperation and mutual support, which are vital for personal development. Thus, achieving a peaceful setting is essential for attaining educational excellence.
Modern technology has brought about significant changes in our daily lives, transforming the way we live, work, and communicate. The advent of the internet and smart devices has made information accessible at our fingertips, empowering individuals with unprecedented access to knowledge. However, this rapid technological progress is not without its challenges. Privacy concerns and the potential for technology to weaken social interactions are issues that require careful consideration. Despite these concerns, innovations in technology continue to provide solutions to global challenges, such as climate change and healthcare. As a result, modern technology remains a transformative force shaping our future.
Hancock Building certainly lives up to its name. The title is derived from the Latin word lucere, meaning to shine, and the artwork's 115 lights depict a scale map of the stars that shine in the night sky. The 13-foot artwork contains thousands of glass bulbs, all fed light through blue illuminating fiber optic lines. The sculpture, created by English artist Wolfgang Buttress with the help of astrophysicist Dr. Daniel Bayliss, represents a 3D map of all the stars in the northern hemisphere that are visible with the naked eye. The passage is about the separation of the British Isles from the continent. A continent once bordered with Britain has sunk, but not many people realize that Britain is a relatively recent entity. Scientists have been able to reconstruct this ancient continent with the help of modern technologies. However, no archaeological evidence has ever been found to fully support this claim, leaving the mystery unresolved.
Business etiquette in Australia is relatively straightforward for Americans and Europeans, but it differs greatly to the approach taken in the country's Asian backyard, the source of an increasing proportion of its trade and investment. To many Asians, Australians' openness can appear blunt and unsubtle, their informality confusing and even disrespectful. Even if Australia is less egalitarian than it was, it is less hierarchical than many societies, and first names are almost always used, irrespective of rank.
After centuries of inequality in UK higher education benefiting men, there has been a reversal over the past 3 decades. A lower proportion of entrants to UK higher education institutions are male than ever before, and they make up less than 1/2 of the total. Other developed countries have undergone a similar shift. Male underachievement is not seen only in the figures for entry but also in non-continuation, dropout, rates, and degree performance statistics.
In the process of studying these techniques, I learned something remarkable, that there's far more potential in our minds than we often give them credit for. I'm not just talking about the fact that it's possible to memorize lots of information using memory techniques. I'm talking about a lesson that is more general and in a way much bigger, that it's possible with training and hard work to teach oneself to do something that might seem really difficult.
Hippocrates allowed observation, rationality, and his own genuine respect for his patients to guide his practice. Using the scientific method, he carefully recorded his patients' symptoms and responses to treatments and used the data gathered to evaluate and prescribe the most successful regimens. His prestige as a great medical practitioner, educator, and author helped spread these ideals of rational medicine throughout the ancient world. Some of the most basic organisms are smarter than we thought. Rather than moving about randomly, amoebas and plankton employ sophisticated strategies to look for food and might travel in a way that optimizes their foraging. Immediately after an amoeba turned right, it was twice as likely to turn left as right again, and vice versa, they told a meeting of the American Physical Society meeting in Denver, Colorado last week. This suggests that the cells have a rudimentary memory, being able to remember the last direction they had just turned in.
The lute is a plucked string instrument that played a central role in European music from the late Middle Ages to the Baroque period. Its pear-shaped body and fretted neck made it a versatile instrument, suitable both for solo performance and for ensemble playing. Unlike the modern guitar, the lute usually has courses of paired strings, which produce a richer and more resonant sound. During the Renaissance, it was highly valued by both professional musicians and amateur players. In the 18th century, however, its popularity gradually declined as keyboard instruments became more fashionable. Nevertheless, for those interested in the practice of early music, it remains an important subject of study, and today it is still frequently featured in historically informed concerts. Sports were firstly part of survival skills, tightly linked to human existence, but now they are mainly for recreational purposes and enjoyment. For example, swimming, hunting, and fishing were originally necessary for food, but today they have evolved into popular competitive sports. Some of them are actually seen as global competitions, attracting millions of spectators.
Universities have always been connected with political societies, and in many countries the student union provides a forum for debate and for discussion. The accommodation in which students want to live in is one that reflects their ideals. There is so much opportunity in university for students to pursue their interests. The lens in the human eye works much like the lens in a camera. Just as a camera adjusts its focus, the lens changes its shape to bend and focus the light a second time, ensuring that you have a clear and precise image of whatever you are looking at. Whether the object is close or far away, the lens adapts accordingly. Structurally, the lens is made up of water and protein, which together allow it to remain transparent and flexible throughout much of life.
Paris is very old. There has been a settlement there for at least 6,000 years, and its shape has been determined in part by the River Seine and in part by the edicts of France's rulers. But the great boulevards we admire today are relatively new and were constructed to prevent any more barricades being created by the rebellious population. That work was carried out in the middle 19th century. The earlier Paris had been in part a maze of narrow streets and alleyways. But you can imagine that the work was not only highly expensive, but caused great distress among the 500,000 or so whose houses were simply razed and whose neighborhoods disappeared. What is done cannot usually be undone, especially when buildings are torn down.
Is it a glimpse of a dystopian future, or just a common-sense approach to technology? Either way, Gatwick Airport's newest hotel offers something different, a vision of a post-employee economy where tasks are automated by a computer. At Block, a hotel of 245 rooms, there are just 2 members of staff on duty. Despite its unglamorous location in a renovated office block above the airport's south terminal, Block has grand plans to shake up the hotel industry. Thanks to a partnership with Korean technology giant Samsung, almost everything here can be controlled by smartphone. Once guests have made a reservation online, they are given a code that can be used to log into an app, enabling them to check in without standing at a reception desk. In the room, the phone can operate the air conditioning, switch on lights, turn on TVs, and open blackout blinds. Even keys have been rendered obsolete. Guests can unlock the door to their room using their phone, with something called near-field communication technology. At the end of their stay, checkout is also done via the app, meaning that guests can complete their entire stay without speaking a single word to a member of staff.
Team Lab's digital mural at the entrance to Tokyo's Skytree, one of the world's monster skyscrapers, is 40 meters long and immensely detailed. But however massive this form of digital art becomes, and it's a form subject to rampant inflation, Inoko's theories about seeing are based on more modest and often pre-digital sources. An early devotee of comic books and cartoons, no surprises there. Then computer games, he recognized when he started to look at traditional Japanese art that all those forms had something in common, something about the way they captured space. In his discipline of physics, Inoko had been taught that photographic lenses, along with the conventions of Western art, were the logical way of transforming 3 dimensions into 2, conveying the real world onto a flat surface. But Japanese traditions employed a different spatial logic. As he said in an interview last year with J. Collab.org, that is uniquely Japanese. We believe anyone can excel with the right foundation. By understanding the basis of information setting for knowledge, such as coding and other skills, participants gain essential expertise. Through 912 projects, you will build your portfolio, and upon completing the program, you will have a robust showcase of your abilities.
While many businesses struggle to adapt in today's competitive market, only a few have managed to truly thrive. Those that succeed often work alongside innovative partners who help facilitate growth through collaboration and shared resources. Thriving in such environments requires not only resilience but also the ability to adapt and work effectively alongside others.
This museum restaurant is a perfect place to have a party. You can have a party of 25 people. More people are possible and prices start at $45.
Make sure your shipping envelopes are clean and dry, and remember to remove any paper shipping labels prior to dropping off. Paper labels are detrimental to the store drop-off recycling process. If the labels don't peel off easily, you can cut them off with scissors. I feel about the opportunity to take on new challenges and contribute to the team. While I was working at my previous job, I gained valuable experience that I believe will be beneficial in this role. I am eager to take a position at your esteemed company, and I am confident that my skills and experience make me a strong candidate. Please let me know if there are any additional steps I need to take or information I need to provide. I am looking forward to your response.
Dear Sir or Madam, my name is Tonia. My roommate and I are looking for a nice apartment near my college's campus. We are very quiet and study a lot. I study history and my roommate studies French. We are very interested in renting your apartment. We can pay the rent on time because we do a part-time work too. Some of our friends live in the same building and have recommended your place to us. They mentioned that you are a kind and responsible landlord, and we hope to have the same positive experience. I would like to make an appointment to view the apartment in person. Our application form is ready, and we are prepared to proceed with the process quickly. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Best regards, Tonia.
The Kuipers Library is a research library in Amsterdam's famous Rijksmuseum. It is the oldest and largest of its kind in the country and aesthetically astounding. However, despite the streams of tourists that flow through the museum, far too few seem to trickle into its remarkable reading room. The 19th century library, which has recently been restored, has been collecting content since 1885. Its shelves are stocked with manuscripts bound to entice any art history lover. While browsing its extensive collection, you'll come across books, journals, and periodicals, as well as catalogs about art auctions, exhibitions, trades, and collections. Following its renovations, the museum opened the library's reading room to visitors. Tourists, students, and art historians alike are welcome to delve into its rich collection. Tables on the ground floor allow people to hunker down with their research materials, surrounded by the library's aesthetically astounding walls of books. The pandemic created an urgent situation, prompting unprecedented contribution to bolster the health system, reform the pharmaceutical sector, and distribute relief throughout the country. Employees should adhere to regulations that define conditions of the working environment to ensure a safe and healthy workplace. These measures are intended to minimize hazards in the workplace. In some countries, companies are required to purchase insurance to protect employees' rights and interests.
In studies of chimpanzee behavior, researchers seek to answer how they learn to use tools with fines applied to understanding primate cognition. In an experiment, signals were sent to test communication skills, and responses occurred without prior training. Stress, that tense feeling often connected to have much to do, many bills to pay and not enough time or money is a common emotion that knows few borders. About 3/4 of people in the US, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and Italy say they experience stress on a daily basis, according to polling. The anxious feelings are even more intense during the holidays. Germans feel stress more intensely than those in other countries polled. People in the US cited financial pressure as the top worry. Memories can become scrambled, sometimes in the process of attempting to retrieve something. You might relate a story to a friend, but unwittingly include some mistaken details. Later, as you attempt to recall the episode, you might come across your memory of the scrambled recall attempt instead of your original memory. Memory is malleable. It is not, as commonly thought, like a museum piece sitting in a display case.
Children who eat breakfast regularly consume more nutrients that are essential for healthy development. As a result, they are more likely to thrive both physically and mentally. Studies also show that such children tend to behave better in school and maintain higher levels of concentration. Whether you want to exercise and stay fit, train professionally with like-minded people, or indulge your competitive streak, Trinity Sport and Fitness has it covered. We've got a dedicated support development team on campus to support every student taking part in sports. You might want to participate in sports competitions, volunteer with a local sports class, or simply play for fun with our social sport program. Trinity Fitness members of our public-facing sports facility will also entitle you to discounts when you are booking a sports facility and fitness class. You will also get an opportunity to benefit from tailored personal training, free activities, events, and lots more.
The increasing darkness in the northern hemisphere this time of year indicates to the plant that autumn is coming on, so it starts recouping materials from the leaves before they drop off. Evergreens protect their needle-like foliage from freezing with waxy coatings and natural antifreeze. But broadleaf plants like sugar maples, birches, and sumacs have no such protections. As a result, they shed their leaves, but before they do, the plants first try to salvage important nutrients, such as nitrogen and phosphorus.
Complementary therapies such as those practiced by naturopaths, chiropractors, and acupuncturists have become increasingly popular in Australia over the last few decades. Interest initially coincided with enthusiasm for alternative lifestyles, while immigration and increased contact and trade with China have also had an influence. The status of complementary therapies is being revisited in a number of areas: legal regulation, the stances of doctors' associations, their inclusion in medical education, and scientific research into their efficacy.
Talking is not just an activity of the vocal cords, it is a way of connecting with ourselves and others that creates a culture of health and well-being, specifically speaking with healthcare practitioners about health worries and more generally opening up to create more and stronger social ties can have many positive benefits.
Research is a process of investigation leading to new insights effectively shared and is central to the purpose of any university. Students have the right to be taught by acknowledged experts in their field, which requires that staff members operate at the most advanced level appropriate to their discipline and level. Research is, therefore, crucial to a positive student experience from further education to doctoral development.
Researchers suggest the following tips as you begin to network: seek common ground, engage with your network regularly and consistently, apply yourself to making your network work or it will wither. It is a skill that you need to practice, not a talent.
With the increase in women's participation in the labor force, many mothers have less time available to undertake domestic activities. At the same time, there has been increasing recognition that the father's relationship with a child is important. A father can have many roles in the family, ranging from income provider to teacher, carer, and playmate. Therefore, balancing paid work and family responsibilities can be an important issue for both fathers and mothers in families.
At the end of the last ice age, the melting ice disrupted the ocean currents in the North Atlantic and caused a drop in temperature of almost 5 degrees, even though the rest of the planet was warming. The North Atlantic region remained in a cold period for 1,300 years. The same thing happened around 8,000 years ago when the cooling lasted about 100 years, and it could happen again today. Even a short period of cooling in the North Atlantic could have a dramatic effect on the wildlife and the human populations living there.
Electric eels are born to shock, thanks to cells called electrocytes which, stacked like batteries, make up 80% of their bodies. These cunning South American hunters can deliver debilitating blows of up to 600 volts to their prey, but they've harnessed their electricity to pack even bigger punches. Last year, Vanderbilt University biologist Kenneth Catania revealed electric eels bring their positively charged head and negatively charged tail closer together to generate a more powerful current.
A graphic introduction was put together by Northern artists who have interpreted discussions with scientists from the Supergen Bioenergy Hub in a series of striking images which imagine alternative futures and explain some of the technology involved and how it might be put into practice.
The way we design our cities needs a serious rethink. After thousands of years of progress in urban development, we plateaued some 60 years ago. Cities are not safer, healthier, more efficient, or more equitable. They are getting worse on these measures. The statistics on chronic disease, rising road tolls, and congestion in our urban environments paint a bleak future. The clues to why lie in how we think about and design our cities. Since Austria sits at a high elevation and spends a quarter of the year under snow, it should come as no surprise that heating is a matter of considerable importance in the country. What may be surprising, however, is that Vienna, a grand imperial city of music, art, and history, actually boasts a museum dedicated specifically to heating systems.
The theme of contrast evident in Blue Skies is typical of Ms. Vu's work. She explores organic structures using the newest technologies. She is inspired by minute detail, but often works on a large scale. Her sculptures are ambiguous, yet familiar, blurring the boundaries between the real and the artificial. Organic structures and spirals are the starting point for my creative exploration, but my work extends these concepts to explore the overlap between the real and the artificial, and how we often don't differentiate between the two, Ms. Vu said.
Mercury is not found in many common products that we buy because it can be very dangerous. The most common products that contain mercury are batteries, powerful outdoor lights, disinfectants, and thermometers, which are used to measure our body's temperature. It can also be found in barometers, which are used to measure air pressure and show changes in weather, and thermostats, which regulate the temperature of buildings. Mercury can also be found in printer and photocopy toners.
The wristwatch works by tracking information such as a person's pulse or movement. When it detects a change in a person's health, the watch sends information to a touchscreen hub located in the home. The hub then alerts predetermined contacts and calls for help immediately.
The rest of Taylor's restaurant is student-run. Students in quantity food production and service management. Classes make the articulate and detailed dishes. We teach students to understand where a product comes from and to respect that product, Garmy said. Skeptics might doubt the quality of a student-run restaurant, but one visit to Taylor's will immediately change their outlook. Dishes such as orecchietti and butternut squash, pappardelle with duck and bistro chicken will please any appetite while imparting the need to return for a second taste. Students are taught to use ratios and proportions rather than recipes when creating dishes. Understanding ratios and proportions when creating dishes instead of recipes makes students think and actually teaches them how to cook, rather than just reading a recipe and not learning from it, Garmy said. Garmy said he believes in using all aspects of a product, which Taylor's menu reflects. For lots of first-year students, the university may be their first experience living away from home for an extended period. It is a definite break from home. In my point of view, this is the best thing that you can do. I know you have to fend for yourself, cook and clean after yourself, basically look after yourself without your parents, but the truth is sometime in your life you are going to have to part with lovely mummy and daddy. But they are only just a phone call away, and it is really good to have some quality time without them. The first few weeks can be a lonely period. There may be concerns about forming the friendship. When new students look around, it may seem that everyone else is self-confident and socially successful. The reality is that everyone has the same concerns. Increased personal freedom can feel both wonderful and frightening. Students can come and go as they choose with no one to hassle them. The strange environment with new kinds of procedures and new people can create the sense of being on an emotional roller coaster. This is normal and to be expected. You meet so many more people in the halls than if you stayed at home. The main points about living away from home are no parents. You don't have to tell them where you're going, who you're going with, what time you'll be coming, why you're going, etc. You learn various social skills. You have to get along with your roommates. Living with them can present special, sometimes intense, problems. Negotiating respect of personal property, personal space, sleep, and relaxation needs can be a complex task. The complexity increases when roommates are of different backgrounds with very different values.
The tomato is probably the most widely grown vegetable by the home gardener because of its food value, many uses, and relative ease of culture. Originating in Central and South America, the tomato was domesticated in Mexico. There are many related wild species in South America. Tomati was the name used by Native Americans.
With about 1.5 billion non-native speakers, English has become the world's own language. Such dominance has its downside, of course. There are now about 6,800 languages left in the world compared with perhaps twice that number back at the dawn of agriculture. Thanks in part to the rise of Uber languages, most importantly English, the remaining languages are now dying at the rate of about one a fortnight. Want to learn Busu, anyone? Then you'd better head to Cameroon fast, before one of the language's last 8 speakers kicks the bucket as the Busunese presumably doesn't say.
Green spaces contribute significantly to a reduction of soil and aerial temperatures during spells of hot weather, so contributing to human well-being. In the garden context, there is, however, little information as to what extent various types of plants differ in their cooling potential and how certain planting combinations may maximize cooling under a scenario of low rainfall and minimal water inputs. Mischel is the creator of the marshmallow test, one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology, which is often cited as evidence of the importance of self-control. In the original test, which was administered at the Bing Nursery School at Stanford in the 1960s, Mischel's team would present a child with a treat. Marshmallows were just one option, and tell her that she could either eat the one treat immediately or wait alone in the room for several minutes until the researcher returned, at which point she could have two treats. The promised treats were always visible, and the child knew that all she had to do to stop the agonizing wait was ring a bell to call the experimenter back, although in that case, she wouldn't get the second treat. The longer a child delayed gratification, Mischel found that the longer she was able to wait, the better she would fare later in life at numerous measures of what we now call executive function. She would perform better academically, earn more money, and be healthier and happier. She would also be more likely to avoid a number of negative outcomes, including jail time, obesity, and drug use.
Keith Haring began as an underground artist, literally. His first famous projects were pieces of stylized graffiti drawn in New York subway stations. Haring traveled from station to station, drawing with chalk and chatting with commuters about his work. These doodles helped him develop his classic style, and he grew so prolific, doing up to 40 drawings a day, that it was not long before fame and a measure of fortune followed. Soon, galleries and collectors from the art establishment wanted to buy full-sized pieces by Haring. The paintings skyrocketed in price, but this did not sit well with Haring's philosophy. He believed that art, or at least his art, was for everyone. Soon, Haring opened a store which he called the Pop Shop, which he hoped would attract a broad range of people. While somewhat controversial among street artists, some of whom accused Haring of selling out, the Pop Shop changed the way people thought about the relationship between art and business.
Egg-eating snakes are a small group of snakes whose diet consists only of eggs. Some eat only small eggs which they have to swallow whole as the snake has no teeth. Instead, some other snakes eat bigger eggs, but it requires special treatment. These snakes have spines that stick out from the backbone. The spines crack the egg open as it passes through the throat.
A new report by environmental nonprofit The Nature Conservancy lays out how trees could pave the way to cleaner air and cooler cities. Using geospatial information on forest cover paired with air pollution data and population forecasts for 245 cities, researchers found that trees have the biggest health payoffs in densely populated, polluted cities like Delhi, Karachi, and Dhaka. The Conservancy and the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group presented the findings of their global survey this week at the American Public Health Association meeting in Denver, Colorado.
Samuel Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language is one of the most famous dictionaries in history. First published in 1755, the dictionary took just over 8 years to compile, required 6 helpers and listed 40,000 words. Each word was defined in detail, the definitions illustrated with quotations, covering every branch of learning. It was a huge scholarly achievement, a more extensive and complex dictionary than any of its predecessors. The comparable French dictionnaire had taken 55 years to compile and required the dedication of 40 scholars. The speed of sound, otherwise known as Mach 1, varies with temperature. At sea level on a standard day, the temperature is 59 F, and Mach 1 is approximately 761 mph. As the altitude increases, the temperature and speed of sound both decrease until about 36,000 feet, after which the temperature remains steady until about 60,000 feet. Within that 36,000–60,000 foot range, Mach 1 is about 661 mph. Because of the variation, it is possible for an airplane flying supersonic at high altitude to be slower than a subsonic flight at sea level. The transonic band, the sound barrier, extends from around Mach 0.8 when the first supersonic shock waves form on the wing to Mach 1.2 when the entire wing has gone supersonic. High emotional intelligence can help a manager improve workplace communication skills, employee motivation, and organizational effectiveness. If a manager has high empathy, key component of emotional intelligence, he or she will be able to listen to the concerns of employees and will be more understanding of their needs, wants, and concerns. This will most likely translate into increased motivation and satisfaction of employees and ultimately will have a positive effect on the effectiveness of the business.
Of the more than 1,000 bat species worldwide, 22 are native to North America. And while there are no pollinator bats in our area, gardeners should champion those that do live here because they're insectivorous. These bats consume moths, beetles, and mosquitoes and can eat up to 500 mosquito-sized insects per hour. They also protect gardens and crops from such pests as cucumber beetles, cutworms, and leafhoppers.
Dance has played an important role in many musicals. In some cases, dance numbers are included as an excuse to add to the color and spectacle of the show, but dance is more effective when it forms an integral part of the plot. An early example is Richard Rodgers' On Your Toes, 1936, in which the story about classical ballet meeting the world of jazz enabled dance to be introduced in a way that enhances rather than interrupts the drama. In The Origin of Species, Darwin provided abundant evidence that life on Earth has evolved over time, and he proposed natural selection as the primary mechanism for that change. He observed that individuals differ in their inherited traits and that selection acts on such differences, leading to evolutionary change. Although Darwin realized that variation in heritable traits is a prerequisite for evolution, he did not know precisely how organisms pass heritable traits to their offspring. Just a few years after Darwin published The Origin of Species, Gregor Mendel wrote a groundbreaking paper on inheritance in pea plants. In that paper, Mendel proposed a model of inheritance in which organisms transmit discrete heritable units, now called genes, to their offspring. Although Darwin did not know about genes, Mendel's paper set the stage for understanding the genetic differences on which evolution is based.
Although Botswana is rich in diamonds, it has high unemployment and stratified socioeconomic classes. In 1999, the nation suffered its first budget deficit in 16 years because of a slump in the international diamond market. Yet Botswana remains one of the wealthiest and most stable countries on the African continent.
We now know through the work of neuroscientists that the human brain is wired to mimic other people, and this mimicry involves actual involuntary physiological experience in the observer. Human beings tend to imitate actions that they see. Physiologically, our brains include mirror neurons which react to actions that are seen as if we are doing the action ourselves. It is largely an unconscious and automatic experience. When we hear people speak, observe their vocal nuances, watch their posture, gestures, and facial expressions, etc. Neural networks in our brains are stimulated by the shared representations, generating feelings within us that reflect the experience of those we are observing.
The classic era of Mayan civilization came to an end around 900 AD. Why this happened is unclear. The cities were probably over-farming the land, so that a period of drought led to famine. Recent geological research supports this, as there appears to have been a 200-year drought around this time. Performance appraisals have traditionally been considered the best way to evaluate an employee's performance, but increasingly organizations are finding them of little value. Employees find them stressful and unhelpful. Importantly, they also take up a lot of time. When Deloitte analyzed their own process, they found managers and employees spent around 2 million hours a year on performance reviews. A growing number of companies have decided to abolish performance reviews altogether, instead introducing more regular catch-ups.
Music is an important part of our lives. We connect and interact with it daily and use it as a way of projecting our self-identities to the people around us. The music we enjoy, whether it's country or classical, rock and roll or rap, reflects who we are. But where did music at its core first come from? It's a puzzling question that may not have a definitive answer. 1. Leading researcher, however, has proposed that the key to understanding the origin of music is nestled snugly in the loving bond between mother and child. In a lecture at the University of Melbourne, Richard Parncutt, an Australian-born professor of systematic musicology, endorsed the idea that music originally spawned from motherese, the playful voices mothers adopt when speaking to infants and toddlers. As the theory goes, an increased human brain size caused by evolutionary changes occurring between 1 and 2 million years ago resulted in earlier births, more fragile infants, and a critical need for stronger relationships between mothers and their newborn babies. According to Parncutt, who is based at the University of Graz in Austria, motherese arose as a way to strengthen this maternal bond and to help ensure an infant's survival.
Higher education qualifications provide a substantial advantage in the labor market. Higher education graduates are less likely to be unemployed and tend to have higher incomes than those without such qualifications. Having a highly educated workforce can also lead to increased productivity and innovation and make Australia more competitive in the global market.
Civics and citizenship education builds students' knowledge and understanding of the ways in which citizens can actively participate in Australia's diverse and inclusive society. Students learn about the civic institutions and the processes through which decisions are made for the common good of the community, and they also develop the skills and understandings that relate to the organization of a harmonious democratic society.
Research has suggested that major stresses in our lives are life changes, for example, moving house, marriage, or relationship breakdown. Work-related factors, including unemployment and boredom, are also common causes of stress. Differences in personality may also play a part. Many tests have shown that in a very broad way, peoples in most parts of the world have similar color preferences. Blue is the most preferred and popular hue, followed in order by red, green, purple, yellow, and orange. Overlying this basic order of color preference, however, are the responses of individuals, which of course vary widely and may also be very powerful. Children are likely to have strong preferences for some colors and aversions to others, but sometimes will not admit to them, since outside factors may be influential in determining both color preferences and the way that they are expressed or suppressed. Current fashions in clothes and accessories, gender stereotyping and peer group pressure may all play a significant part. Boys in particular may be reluctant to admit to any strong preferences for colors, other than those of favorite football teams, because color awareness may be regarded by their peer group as feminine. Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence comes it by that vast store which the busy and boundless fancy of man has painted on it with an almost endless variety? Whence has it all the materials of reason and knowledge? To this I answer in one word: from experience, in that all our knowledge is founded, and from that it ultimately derives itself. Cuteness in offspring is a potent protective mechanism that ensures survival for otherwise completely dependent infants. Previous research has linked cuteness to early ethological ideas of a Kindchen schema, infant schema, where infant facial features serve as innate releasing mechanisms for instinctual caregiving behaviors. We propose extending the concept of cuteness beyond visual features to include positive infant sounds and smells. Evidence from behavioral and neuroimaging studies links this extended concept of cuteness to simple instinctual behaviors and to caregiving, protection, and complex emotions. We review how cuteness supports key parental capacities by igniting fast privileged neural activity followed by slower processing in large brain networks also involved in play, empathy, and perhaps even higher-order moral emotions.
Over the past 2 decades, around a third of the world's mangrove swamps have been converted for human use, with many turned into valuable shrimp farms. In 2007, an economic study of such shrimp farms in Thailand showed that the commercial profits per hectare were $9,632. If that were the only factor, conversion would seem an excellent idea. However, proper accounting shows that for each hectare, government subsidies formed $8,412 of this figure, and there were costs, too: $1,000 for pollution and $12,392 for losses to ecosystem services. These comprised damage to the supply of foods and medicines that people had taken from the forest, the loss of habitats for fish, and less buffering against storms. And because a given shrimp farm only stays productive for 3 or 4 years, there was the additional cost of restoring them afterwards. Almost no one regards corn with suspicion. But the same can't be said for humans' ingenious ability to engineer the plants we eat. Genetically modified (GM) crops are viewed with such hostility that they are barely grown in Europe. However, a new study by an independent group of scientists, who have done the most comprehensive review of the evidence so far, shows that our aversion to GM food is pointless, unscientific, and harmful to farmers.
Seminars are not designed to be mini lectures. Their educational role is to provide an opportunity for you to discuss interesting and/or difficult aspects of the course. This is founded on the assumption that it is only by actively trying to use the knowledge that you have acquired from lectures and texts that you can achieve an adequate understanding of the subject. If you do not understand a point, it is highly unlikely that you will be the only person in the group in that position. You will invariably be undertaking a service for the entire group if you come to the seminar equipped with questions on matters which you feel you did not fully understand. The seminar is to provoke discussion.
Music was as important to the ancient Egyptians as it is in our modern society, although it is thought that music played a role throughout the history of Egypt. Those that study the Egyptian writings have discovered that music seemed to become more important in what is called the Pharaonic period of their history. This was the time when the Egyptian dynasties of the pharaohs were established, around 3100 BCE, and music was found in many parts of everyday Egyptian life.
Over the last 10,000 years, there seem to have been two separate and conflicting building sentiments throughout the history of towns and cities. One is the desire to start again, for a variety of reasons. An earthquake or a tidal wave may have demolished the settlement, or fire destroyed it, or the new city marks a new political beginning. The other can be likened to the effect of a magnet. Established settlements attract people who tend to come whether or not there is any planning for their arrival. The clash between these two sentiments is evident in every established city, unless its development has been almost completely accidental or is lost in history. Incidentally, many settlements have been planned from the beginning, but for a variety of reasons, no settlement followed the plan. A good example is Curwen, on the Clyde River in New South Wales, which was surveyed in the second half of the 19th century, in expectation that people would come to establish agriculture and a small port. But no one came. Most country towns in New South Wales started with an original survey whose grid lines are still there today in the pattern of the original streets.
An herbal is a book of plants, describing their appearance, their properties, and how they may be used for preparing ointments and medicines. The medical use of plants is recorded on fragments of papyrus and clay tablets from ancient Egypt, Sumeria and China that date back 5,000 years but document traditions far older still. Over 700 herbal remedies were detailed in the Papyrus Ebers, an Egyptian text written in 1500 BC. Around 65 BC, a Greek physician called Dioscorides wrote an herbal that was translated into Latin and Arabic. Known as De Medical, it became the most influential work on medicinal plants in both Christian and Islamic worlds until the late 17th century. An illustrated manuscript copies of the text made in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, survives from the 6th century. The first printed herbals date from the dawn of European printing in the 1480s. They provided valuable information for apothecaries, whose job it was to make the pills and potions prescribed by physicians. In the next century, landmark herbals were produced in England by William Turner, considered to be the father of British botany, and John Gerard, whose illustrations would inspire the floral fabric, wallpaper and tile designs of William Morris 4 centuries later. David Lynch is professor and head of education at Charles Darwin University. Prior to this, he was sub-dean in the Faculty of Education and Creative Arts at Central Queensland University and foundation head of the university's Noosa campus. David's career in education began as a primary school teacher in Queensland in the early 1980s and progressed to 4 principal positions before entering higher education. David's research interests predominate in teacher education, with particular interest in building teacher capability to meet a changed world.
You have about 30 minutes to answer each question. You must take account of how many marks are available for each part when you answer it. Even if you think you can write more, don't spend 15 minutes answering a part worth only 5 marks. Leave space at the end of your answer and come back to it if you have time to spare later. And if you can't think of an answer to some part, leave a space and move on to the next part. Don't write about something else if you don't know the correct answer. This is just a waste of your valuable time and the examiner's.
Active Learning Classrooms, ALCs, are student-centered, technology-rich classrooms. They are easily identified with their large, circular tables and movable seating designed to improve student engagement in class. Typically, each table is accompanied by a whiteboard and flat screen monitor to display student work, and larger rooms frequently have miniature bulb and microphones at each table. In this way, students are able to signal if they have questions or want to speak to the entire room.
A surprising number of writers, even those who have thought of their writing as self-expression, have sought a freedom from the tyranny of subjectivity, echoing Goethe's claim that every healthy effort is directed from the inward to the outward world. From time to time, others have risen to defend commitment, engagement, and involvement. But at least until recently, the predominant demand in this century has been for some sort of objectivity.
Ponzi is infamous. His original scheme was based on the legitimate arbitrage of international reply coupons for postage stamps, but he soon began diverting new investors' money to make payments to earlier investors as interest. Giant exoplanets, like the so-called hot Jupiters that are similar in characteristics to the solar system's biggest, planet and orbit very close to their host stars, are excellent targets for astronomers in their search for their extrasolar worlds. The size and proximity of these planets is easy to detect, as they create a large decrease in brightness when passing in front of their parent stars.
To qualify as a conservancy, a committee must define the conservancy's boundary, elect a representative conservancy committee, negotiate a legal constitution, prove the committee's ability to manage funds, and produce an acceptable plan for equitable distribution of wildlife-related benefits. Once approved, registered conservancies acquire the rights to a sustainable wildlife quota set by the ministry. John Milton wrote in a wide range of genres, in several languages, and on an extraordinary range of subjects. His was a more general education than is offered at Cambridge these days, and it continued after his 7 years here, equipping him with the tools to write some of the most groundbreaking literature ever seen, and to engage as a polemicist on many different social, political, and theological questions. The ruins of the South Fremantle Power Station have stood empty since 1985, home only to urban explorers and street artists. Opened in 1951, the power station was once a pillar of progress for the expanding energy demands of Perth. Here it stood proud and strong for 34 years, supplying energy to its surrounding metropolis until 1985, when it was deemed to no longer be worth the money. The doors were shuttered, and the plant's 4 tall chimney stacks were demolished, leaving the rest of the plant to rot by the sea.
The electrons that orbit closest to the nucleus are strongly attracted. They are called bound electrons. The electrons that are farther away from the pull of the nucleus can be forced out of their orbits. These are called free electrons. Free electrons can move from one atom to another. This movement is known as electron flow. Electricity is the movement or flow of electrons from one atom to another.
One of the most popular forms of theatre is musical. Combining drama, dance, and music, the musical has been around for over a century, and in that time has kept pace with changing tastes and social conditions, as well as advances in theatre technology. Many modern musicals are known for their spectacular sets, lighting, and other effects.
London's National Portrait Gallery is currently celebrating the 50-year career of photographer Sandra Lausada. The 21 portraits on display depict key figures in literature, film, and fashion from the early 1960s. Subsequent to the acquisition of 40 portraits by Lausada, the display at the National Portrait Gallery highlights shots taken between 1960 and 1964, many of which feature in Lausada's book Public Faces, Private Places, 2008. Formal commissioned portraits are shown alongside behind the scenes, photographs taken on film sets, and unguarded portraits of sitters captured at home.
Many people today think of culture in the way that it was thought of in Europe during the 18th and early 19th centuries. This concept of culture reflected inequalities within European societies and their colonies around the world. This understanding of culture equates culture with civilization and contrasts both with nature or non-civilization. According to this understanding of culture, some countries are more civilized than others, and some people are more cultured than others. Anything that doesn't fit into this category is labeled as chaos or anarchy. From this perspective, culture is closely tied to cultivation, which is the progressive refinement of human behavior. In practice, culture referred to elite goods and activities such as haute cuisine, high fashion or haute couture, museum-caliber art, and classical music. The word cultured referred to people who knew about and took part in these activities. For example, someone who used culture in this sense might argue that classical music is more refined than music by working-class people, such as jazz or the indigenous music traditions of Aboriginal peoples.
Genius in the popular conception is inextricably tied up with precocity. Doing something truly creative, we're inclined to think, requires the freshness and exuberance and energy of youth. Orson Welles made his masterpiece, Citizen Kane, at 25. Herman Melville wrote a book a year, through his late 20s, culminating at age 32 with Moby Dick. Mozart wrote his breakthrough piano concerto No. 9 in E-flat major at the age of 21. In some creative forms like lyric poetry, the importance of precocity has hardened into an iron law. How old was T.S. Eliot when he wrote the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock? I grow old, 23. Poets peak young, the creativity researcher James Kaufman maintains. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the author of Flow, agrees. The most creative lyric verse is believed to be that written by the young. According to the Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner, a leading authority on creativity, lyric poetry is a domain where talent is discovered early, burns brightly, and then peters out at an early age. Critical thinking involves looking at something you may have seen many times and examining it from many different angles and perspectives. It involves going beyond the obvious or beyond easy to seek new understanding and rare solutions. It involves looking at common issues with uncommon eyes, known problems with new skepticism, everyday conflicts with probing curiosity, and daily challenges with greater attention to detail.
Coffee is enjoyed by millions of people every day, and the coffee experience has become a staple of our modern life and culture. While the current body of research related to the effects of coffee consumption on human health has been contradictory, a study in the June issue of Comprehensive Reviews in Food Science and Food Safety, which is published by the Institute of Food Technologists (IFT), found that the potential benefits of moderate coffee drinking outweigh the risks in adult consumers for the majority of major health outcomes considered.
All kinds of predictions may be about to get even more difficult, thanks to climate change. Though no one is sure exactly what its effects will be, it seems that extreme weather conditions such as storms and hurricanes are likely to become more common. Such events have far-reaching effects on distant weather systems, making general forecasting much harder.
Because of the instructional methods, expected class participation, and the nature of the courses vary, no fixed number of absences is applicable to all situations. Each instructor is responsible for making clear to the class at the beginning of the semester his or her policies and procedures in regard to class attendance and the reasons for them. The wool market was extremely important to the English medieval economy, and wool dominated the English export trade from the late 13th century to its decline in the late 15th century. Wool was at the forefront of the establishment of England as a European political and economic power, and this volume is the first study of the medieval wool market in over 20 years. It investigates in detail the scale and scope of advance contracts for the sale of wool. The majority of these agreements were formed between English monasteries and Italian merchants, and the book focuses on the data contained within them. The pricing structures and market efficiency of the agreements are examined, employing practices from modern finance.
Ice storm is a type of weather. Cold rain falls down into the cold air, changing from water into ice. A heavy ice storm left more than 100 residents' electricity cut off because the ice storm hit down the wire. What is music? In one sense, this is an easy question. Even the least musical among us can recognize pieces of music when we hear them and name a few canonical examples. We know there are different kinds of music, and even if our knowledge of music is restricted, we know which kinds we like and which kinds we do not. An exhibit that brings together for the first time landscapes painted by French Impressionist peer Auguste Renoir comes to the National Gallery of Canada this June. The gallery in Ottawa worked with the National Gallery of London and the Philadelphia Museum of Art to pull together the collection of 60 Renoir paintings from 45 public and private collections.
The exponential growth of the internet was heralded in the 1990s as revolutionizing the production and dissemination of information. Some people saw the internet as a means of democratizing access to knowledge. For people concerned with African development, it seemed to offer the possibility of leapfrogging over the technology gap that separates Africa from advanced industrialized countries.
The wind is air moving around. Some winds can move as fast as a racing car over 100 miles per hour. Winds can travel around the world. Wind can make you feel cold because you lose heat from your body faster when it is windy. Weather forecasters need to know the speed and direction of the wind. The strength of wind is measured using the Beaufort scale from wind force when there is no wind to wind force 12, which can damage houses and buildings and is called hurricane force.
Private schools in the UK are redoubling their marketing efforts to foreigners. Almost a third of the 68,000 boarding pupils at such schools already come from overseas. But now, with many UK residents unwilling or unable to afford the fees and a cultural shift away from boarding, many schools are looking abroad to survive. Overseas students now account for about $500 of fee income a year for boarding schools in the UK.
One city will start to attract the majority of public or private investment. This could be due to natural advantage or political decisions. This in turn will stimulate further investment due to the multiplier effect and significant rural to urban migration. The investment in this city will be at the expense of other cities.
Omniscience may be a foible of men, but it is not so of books. Knowledge, as Johnson said, is of two kinds. You may know a thing yourself, and you may know where to find it. Now the amount which you may know yourself must, at its best, be limited, but what you may know of the sources of information may, with proper training, become almost boundless. And here come the value and use of reference books, the working of one book in connection with another and applying your intelligence to both. By this means we get as near to that omniscient volume which tells everything as ever we shall get, and although the single volume or work which tells everything does not exist, there is a vast number of reference books in existence, knowledge and proper use of which is essential to every intelligent person. Necessary as I believe reference books to be, they can easily be made to be contributory to idleness, and too mechanical a use should not be made of them.
The few people who live in Alaska's the Aleutian Islands have long been accustomed to shipwrecks. They have been part of local consciousness since a Japanese whaling ship ran aground near the western end of the 1,100-mile, 1,800 km volcanic archipelago in 1780, inadvertently naming what is now Rat Island when the ship's infestation scurried ashore and made itself at home. Since then there have been at least 190 shipwrecks in the islands. Roman people had at first been inclined to regard the French Revolution with either indifference or derision, but as the months went by and the emigrants who remained in the city were less and less hopeful of an early return home, the mood of the Romans became increasingly antagonistic towards the assassins of Paris. The nationalization of church property in France, the confiscation of papal territories, the dwindling of contributions, and the paucity of tourists and pilgrims all contributed to an exacerbation of this antagonism. When the French Convention, determined to gain international recognition for the Republic, dispatched envoys to Rome, the people turned upon them in a fury.
Daniel Harris, a scholar of consumption and style, has observed that until photography finally supplanted illustration as the primary means of advertising clothing in the 1950s, glamour inhered less in the face of the drawing, which was by necessity schematic and generalized, than in the sketch's attitude, posture, and gestures, especially in the strangely dainty positions of the hands. Glamour once resided so emphatically in the stance of the model that the faces in the illustrations cannot be said to have expressions at all, but angles or tilts. The chin raised upwards in a haughty look, the eyes lowered in an attitude of introspection, the head cocked at an inquisitive or coquettish angle, or the profile presented in sharp outline, emanating power the severity like an emperor's bust, embossed on a Roman coin.
The lightest of any solid element, lithium has, until now, played a modest role in the industry. Silvery in color and softer than lead, it has been used mainly as an alloy of aluminum, a base for automobile grease, and in the production of glass and ceramics. It is so unstable that it is never found in its pure form in nature. Lithium floats on water, or rather, it skitters wildly about, trailing a vapor cloud of hydrogen, until it dissolves.
Why are moths fatally attracted to the light? One solution is the old glib explanation that the moths are trying to use the flame to navigate. This explanation does not tell us, however, why it is that in many species only males are thus attracted and in a few only females. What's more, if moths need to navigate, they must be from a migrating species. Yet most of the time, such moths are not migrating. Indeed, most species do not migrate at all and thus do not need navigation.
Coral reefs support more marine life than any other ocean ecosystem and are not, surprisingly, a favorite pursuit for many divers. But as well as being physically and biologically spectacular, coral reefs also support the livelihoods of over 500 million people. What is more, this number is expected to double in the coming decades, while the area of the high-quality reef is expected to halve. In combination with the very real threat of climate change, which could lead to increased seawater temperatures and ocean acidification, we start to arrive at some quite frightening scenarios. Can dogs tell when we are happy, sad, or angry? As a dog owner, I feel confident not only that I can tell what kind of emotional state my pets are in, but also that they respond to my emotions. Yet as a hard-headed scientist, I try to take a more rational and pragmatic view. These personal observations seem more likely to result from my desire for a good relationship with my dogs. Chaucer's tales quickly spread throughout England in the early 15th century. Scholars feel the Canterbury Tales reached their instant and continued success because of their accurate and oftentimes vivid portrayal of human nature, unchanged through 600 years since Chaucer's time. George Macy, founder of the Limited Editions Club, wrote on the Canterbury Tales. An important corollary of this focus on language, as the window to legal epistemology, is the central role of discourse to law and other socio-cultural processes. In particular, the ideas that people hold about how language works, linguistic ideologies, combine with linguistic structuring to create powerful, often unconscious effects. In recent years, linguistic anthropologists have made much progress in developing more precisely analytic tools for tracking those effects.
Walt Disney World has become a pilgrimage site partly because of the luminosity of its cross-cultural and marketing, and partly because its utopian aspects appeal powerfully to real needs in the capitalist society. Disney's marketing is unique because it captured the symbolic essence of childhood, but the company has gained access to all public shows, comic books, dolls, apparels, and educational film strips all point to the parks and each other.
The National Portrait Gallery's Conservation Department performs one of the gallery's core functions, the long-term preservation of all collection items to make them accessible now and in future. The collection dates from the 8th century to the present day and consists of portraits in a variety of media, so the gallery employs conservators with expertise in a range of disciplines including framing, painting, paper, sculpture, and photography. Although for centuries preparations derived from living matter were applied to wounds to destroy infection, the fact that a microorganism is capable of destroying one of another species was not established until the latter half of the 19th century, when Pasteur noted the antagonistic effect of other bacteria on the anthrax organism and pointed out that this action might be put to therapeutic use.
Volcanoes blast more than 100 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year, but the gas is usually harmless. When a volcano erupts, carbon dioxide spreads out into the atmosphere and isn't concentrated in one spot. But sometimes the gas gets trapped underground under enormous pressure. If it escapes to the surface in a dense cloud, it can push out oxygen-rich air and become deadly.
Steven Pinker, a cognitive psychologist, best known for his book, The Language Instinct, has called music auditory cheesecake, an exquisite confection crafted to tickle the sensitive spots of at least 6 of our mental faculties. If it vanished from our species, he said, the rest of our lifestyle would be virtually unchanged. Others have argued that, on the contrary, music, along with art and literature, is part of what makes people human. Its absence would have a brutalizing effect. Philip Ball, a British science writer and an avid music enthusiast, comes down somewhere in the middle. He says that music is ingrained in our auditory, cognitive, and motor functions. We have a music instinct as much as a language instinct, and could not rid ourselves of it if we tried.
For many first-year students, the university may be their first experience living away from home for an extended period. It is a definite break from home. The individual's usual sources of support are no longer present to facilitate adjustment to the unfamiliar environment.
In these distant times, the sun was seen to make its daily journey across the sky. At night the moon appeared. Every new night the moon waxed or waned a little, and on a few nights it did not appear at all. At night the great dome of the heavens was dotted with tiny specks of light. They became known as the stars. It was thought that every star in the heavens had its purpose, and that the secrets of the universe could be discovered by making a study of them. It was well known that there were wandering stars. They appeared in different nightly positions against their neighbors, and they became known as planets. It took centuries, in fact, it took millennia, for man to determine the true nature of these wandering stars and to evolve a model of the world to accommodate them and to predict their positions in the sky.
More than simply putting flowers in a container, Ikebana is a disciplined art form in which nature and humanity are brought together. Contrary to the idea of a party-colored or multicolored arrangement of blossoms, Ikebana often emphasizes other areas of the plant, such as its stems and leaves, and emphasizes the shape, line, and form. Though Ikebana is an expression of creativity, certain rules govern its form. The artist's intention behind each arrangement is shown through a piece's color. Combinations, natural shapes, graceful lines, and the implied meaning of the arrangement.
In geologic terms, a plate is a large, rigid slab of solid rock. The word tectonics comes from the Greek, root to build. Putting these two words together, we get the term plate tectonics, which refers to how the Earth's surface is built of plates. The theory of plate tectonics states that the Earth's outermost layer is fragmented into a dozen or larger and small plates that are moving relative to one another.
How is plagiarism detected? It is usually easy for lecturers to identify plagiarism within students' work. The university also actively investigates plagiarism in students' assessed work through electronic detection software called Turnitin. This software compares students' work against text on the internet in journal articles and within previously submitted work from LSBU and other institutions and highlights any matches it finds.
You can study anywhere. Obviously, some places are better than others. Libraries, study lounges, or private rooms are best. Above all, the place you choose to study should not be distracting. Distractions can build up, and the first thing you know, you're out of time and out of luck. Make choosing a good physical environment a part of your study habits.
Sportswomen's records are important and need to be preserved. And if the paper records don't exist, we need to get out and start interviewing people, not to put too fine a point on it while we still have a chance. After all, if the records aren't kept in some form or another, then the stories are lost too.
my school in the City of London held a charity competition. In the community, I was voted as the chairman. We raised £48,000 and I won the first place in the end. During this period, I learnt a lot and realized the importance of tenacity and how to rouse other pupils' awareness.
Shakespeare produced most of his known work between 1590 and 1613. His early plays were mainly comedies and histories, genres he raised to the peak of sophistication and artistry by the end of the 16th century. Next, he wrote mainly tragedies until about 1608, including Hamlet, King Lear, and Macbeth, considered some of the finest examples in the English language. In his last phase, he wrote tragicomedies, also known as romances, and collaborated with other playwrights.
First, new ideas are the wheels of progress. Without them, stagnation reigns. Whether you're a designer dreaming of another world, an engineer working on a new kind of structure, an executive charged with developing a fresh business concept, an advertiser seeking a breakthrough way to sell your product, a fifth-grade teacher trying to plan a memorable school, assembly program, or a volunteer looking for a new way to sell the same old raffle tickets, your ability to generate good ideas is critical to your success. To invest, you need to draw up a clear plan, do your own research, build in a margin of safety by always thinking about the valuation, and ultimately be patient. By all means, include some speculative picks if you wish, but ensure they are only a small part of your portfolio. Looking for an oil explorer whose shares double, treble, and double again is exciting, but such firms are very rare. There are a lot more which have a consistent record of paying out the dividends, which really make the markets work for you once they are reinvested.
Participating regularly in physical activity has been shown to benefit an individual's health and well-being. Regular physical activity is important in reducing the risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease and stroke, obesity, diabetes, and some forms of cancer. The National Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults recommend at least 30 minutes of moderate-intensity physical activity, preferably every day of the week, to obtain health benefits.
Some students say that they need complete quiet to read and study. Others study best in a crowded, noisy room because the noise actually helps them concentrate. Some students like quiet music playing. Others do not. The point is, you should know the level of noise that is optimal for your own studying. However, one general rule for all students is that the television seems to be more of a distraction than music or other background noise. So, leave the TV off when you are reading or studying. Also, don't let yourself become distracted by computer games, email, or internet surfing. Life in the UK 2012 provides a unique overview of well-being in the UK today. The report is the first snapshot of life in the UK to be delivered by the Measuring National Wellbeing Programme and will be updated and published annually. Well-being is discussed in terms of the economy, people, and the environment. Information such as the unemployment rate or number of crimes against the person are presented alongside data on people's thoughts and feelings. For example, satisfaction with our jobs or leisure time and fear of crime. Together, a richer picture on how society is doing is provided.
Elements of both the psychoanalytic and behaviorist theories arrange in modern approaches to personality. Advances in neuroscience have begun to bridge the gap between biochemistry and behavior, but there is still a great deal that needs to be explained. Without a consistent understanding of personality, how can we begin to categorize risk takers? If we cannot, we will be unable to compare their genes with those of others. The American People. Creating a Nation and a Society, Concise Edition examines U.S. history as revealed through the experiences of diverse Americans, both ordinary and extraordinary. With a thought-provoking and rich presentation, the authors explore the complex lives of Americans of all national origins and cultural backgrounds at all levels of society and in all regions of the country.
On average, Iceland experiences a major volcanic event once every 5 years. Since the Middle Ages, a third of all the lava that has covered the Earth's surface has erupted in Iceland. However, according to a recent geological hypothesis, this estimate does not include submarine eruptions, which are much more extensive than those on the land surface.
Fingerprints, referred to as finger marks in forensics, are formed when residue from the ridged skin of the fingers or palms is transferred onto a surface, leaving behind an impression. Finger marks are often made of sweat and colorless, contaminating materials such as soap, moisturizer, and grease. These finger marks are described as latent as they are generally invisible to the naked eye, which means that locating them at a crime scene can be challenging.
Housing agencies pay the utility bills generally because units in developments do not have individual meters. Some buildings have individual meters, and each tenant pay its own to the utility company, so agencies will deduct this from the family's rent.
Mathematics and statistics play a part in almost all daily activities. They are at the heart of advances in science and technology, as well as providing indispensable problem-solving and decision-making tools in many areas of life. They underpin the rigorous analysis and modeling required for new policies, designs, and systems. Mathematical and statistical knowledge is much sought after by employers for a wide variety of jobs, not least in teaching the subject, and a qualification in any one of the areas we offer can bring real benefits in your professional life. By 2025, government experts say America's skies will swarm with 3 times as many planes, and not just the kind of traffic flying today. There will be thousands of tiny jets, seating 6 or fewer at airliner altitudes, competing for space with remotely operated drones that need help avoiding mid-air collisions, and with commercially operated rockets carrying satellites and tourists into space.
Folklore is a modern term for the body of traditional customs, superstitions, stories, dances, and songs that have been adopted and maintained within a given community by processes of repetition not reliant on the written word. Along with folk songs and folktales, this broad category of cultural forms embraces all kinds of legends, riddles, jokes, proverbs, games, charms, omens, spells, and rituals, especially those of pre-literate societies or social classes. Those forms of verbal expression that are handed on from one generation or locality to the next by word of mouth are said to constitute an oral tradition.
What is a country and how is a country defined? When people ask how many countries there are in the world, they expect a simple answer. After all, we've explored the whole planet. We have international travel, satellite navigation, and plenty of global organizations like the United Nations, so we should really know how many countries there are. However, the answer to the question varies according to whom you ask. Most people say there are 192 countries, but others point out that there could be more, like 260 of them. So why isn't there a straightforward answer? The problem arises because there isn't a universally agreed definition of country, and because, for political reasons, some countries find it convenient to recognize or not recognize other countries.
Researchers already know that spending long periods of time in a zero-gravity environment, such as that inside the International Space Station, ISS, results in loss of bone density and damage to the body's muscles. That's partly why stays aboard the ISS are capped at 6 months. And now, a number of NASA astronauts are reporting that their 20/20 vision faded after spending time in space, with many needing glasses once they return to Earth.
In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more and more like the job of chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physicians' practices don't just need to know medicine, they must also be able to balance budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions.